All right, let's go ahead and,
We got one stack and nothing left.
we got one stack of Hindu stuff left, if somebody.
Yeah, we did.
This will be our last lesson until after January 1st, so January the 8th will be the next one. Like that. Wednesday night, we're going to be doing the book of Amos, starting fresh and new with our, get y'all to learn what's in there like we did before. And we're not going to do the whole book, we're just going to do a few chapters. We're going to do introductory stuff. So make sure you bring your Bibles and your computers or your phones or whatever.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
I was looking up the Bible that Mary has.
Right.
NIV by Donovan, and it's been updated, now it says it's Tyndale. Is that the same thing?
Is Tyndall the publisher, is what you're saying, or is it the T in
No,
I D?
it's Tyndale is the publisher. It's, when I pulled up NIV by Donovan, it said this has been updated when I pulled up.
Tyndall's a good publishing company, they're conservative. But you don't want a T in it. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, Tyndall's a very conservative book. In fact, they're more conservative.
Mine's 10.
Yeah. Apparently Tyndall bought them out.
It says Donovan, and it also says Peter. It's the house of the publisher, but it's Donovan on. And these just updated. This one just come out, this version 2 months ago. Yep. Whatever it was, we bought it today and it come out.
All right, I'm just going to run through some of these things. I want to show you some pictures. I went back and looked through some of my notes and I found the number, and I've got it on the web here. They have 330 million gods and goddesses. 330 million gods and goddesses. It said even the Hindus are confused. And imagine that. But they have some major ones, you know, that all of them kind of follow. But then they, depending on what part of India you live in, they kind of. And the Japanese do the same thing, Shinto and all that stuff. They have spirits in the woods. So they've got certain spirits that they pay homage to, and the waterfalls and trees. And that's why if you go to a Japanese restaurant, you see the water, and you see the waterfalls on the wall and all that stuff. That's supposed to bring health and wholeness and the spirits that are in all that. So when we get to Shinto, I'll show you some of that. But they also worship the emperor. And that's really what was behind World War II, was they wanted the oil, and the emperor was able to control the people by forcing them religiously to follow him. You know, so basically suicide is what it amounted to, because they almost destroyed their whole culture and their nation. But anyway, here's some of the goals of Hinduism. Kama, which is the English word there is pleasure, security, artha, religious, dharma, and moksha, which is the goal of reaching complete absorption into the one. Remember I told you that? Buddhism is called nirvana, and Hindu is called moksha. Remember they're on the wheel of life, and you're going reincarnated, and hopefully if you do enough of the good stuff, karma, and if you practice enough good deeds, and you satisfy the one, whoever the one is, and you follow these pathways that are set up under these different gods, then you can ultimately get out of suffering and really non-existent is what it amounts to. Okay? All right, come on now, there it is. Yogas, union with the divine, also called margas or paths. How many have ever been to a yoga class? Anybody? If I went to one, I'd get tired of it and couldn't get out of it. That is a very, in some of these religions like Hinduism, that is a way to get in contact with their beliefs is by doing these exercises. Now, in Western culture, they try to tell you they're good for your health and all these other things, which they may be, But in actuality, you're actually practicing some of the physical forms of that religion.
So is that going against our religion?
Yes, in many ways, but
We never
most
do
people,
that.
most people don't even know that. And there's different forms of yoga. These are some of the different types. Yeah, would you
So
start?
then new people,
Yeah,
then
they
they
were,
quit going to yoga.
they were talking about it, and I've never heard of
Because
that.
a preacher told them that it was against the religion.
It is in a way. But I mean, if you're doing it for physical exercise, but it depends on the instructor.
You know.
If that instructor is knowledgeable of the Hindu faith, you know, the religion,
But
he can
somebody
actually,
down at the Gold Gym doing a yoga class, but they ain't.
they probably don't know. They're in South Carolina. Hey, in
It's
South-
probably not a Hindu.
It's South Carolina yoga. They don't know what's going on. Here's the different kinds. How do I pronounce that? Jnana yoga is knowledge and study writings. So in actually practicing those exercises, you would be actually studying the writings and stuff that go with it. The teachings of Hindu. Monism, the oneness of everything, is another type of yoga. Karma yoga, action yoga, all work is useful. There again, there's instructions on how to do that. And it's all with the meditation as you're doing the physical exercises. And I don't know now, but at one time in the elementary levels, they were doing some of these yoga exercises with the kids and we were in that time. Being on the school district degree, and I don't know about South Carolina, but I have read.
They did that.
They did it.
Great teacher did.
Yeah.
They called the dance class.
Yeah. But it's supposed to, my understanding of the yoga, physically what it does to your body is it actually causes your lymph system as you stretch to empty itself of poisons and things that build up in your system. And by doing the stretching and stuff, it pushes that out of your system. That makes it healthy, is what it's supposed to. Just like a massager, the person who's a massages, what they call them, masseuse, they can mash certain places in your spine and places where your lymph nodes keep points are. And that's all they do is push the lymph out of those lymph nodes, which helps make your body healthy. The lymph system's like a super. It purges your body of anything that's wrong. And sometimes, because of being sedentary, those poisons build up in those lymph systems and you get infected. So that's why a person who's trained can actually help you. If they do it too much, without drinking a lot of water and stuff, you can actually get sick. And so these yoga exercises, my understanding is that's what it's supposed to do. Then bhakti yoga, love and devotion to a God. So this would be the one that you actually have things that you do, emotions and different type exercises to actually get in touch with the God that you are. The Raha yoga, royal yoga, amongst meditation, mantras that are used most familiar is the Om sound, like you see moving stuff like that. Buddhists do that. The sound, supposedly, is the sound that started creation, which I find quite interesting because if you read our Bibles, the Bible says that God spoke, and out of nothing, everything came into being. But here's a religion that says sound was at the beginning of creation, and the sound was Om. So you sit around and go Om, like that. Keep repeating that. And,
Are those words Indian, that's Indian words?
yeah, it's part of their, it's in the English
Language,
form.
that's their language.
Yeah, it doesn't look like that because the language is Sanskrit, which is different written, but that's how it comes out in the English. Then you got the Hatha yoga, force yoga, physical and breathing exercises are more intense with this. Then the Kundalini yoga combines Raha and Hatha together, and then you have 7 psychic centers along the spine releasing spiritual energy. So these exercises, like I said, the lymph system is all through the spine and then your joints and everywhere else. They connect with that, and through these exercises, it's supposed to make you healthier and meditate better and concentrate better. And but if you follow the strict teachings of yoga, you're actually participating in the Hindu religion. And you have writings and stuff that give you guidance. Now, like you said, if you go to the gym and they're doing yoga, most yoga instructors, I would assume, because I've never been in one, they would get into.
I don't know, they might be straight up Hindu Indian.
Far as you know. Now, I know, you ever heard of Pilates? Yeah, I heard Pilates. I have a funny story. When I used to go to the gym and play racquetball, our racquetball court was below where they had a Pilates thing upstairs. There was just a warm lunch that was covered up. We got to making so much noise that the instructor came down and got over to us. She said, y'all making too much noise. I said, you make noise when you're hitting each other. She said, well, we're practicing Pilates, and we need total silence in the water. I said, well, y'all need to pick another time because it's racquetball. Anyway, we had a big debate. Fortunately, I was on the board at the Y, so I could kind of throw my weight with it. I think with all that stuff.
We do a lot of that in Hollywood, don't we?
What's that?
A lot.
It's a meditative, and it's also connected in some ways with Emotional Hinduism. Hindus may worship one god or many gods. As I said a while ago, I'll show you in a minute. It's 230 million. So you can kind of pick the ones you want. It says here they may have home altars. Now, the two ladies that left our church and went to India with mission field, both times they came back, they brought pictures. And when they were going to some of the homes, they had their little altars, kind of like Catholic shit. They had little candles and pictures and the little idols and stuff set and things like that. They offer flowers, food, fire, incense, and singing in home devotion time. Krishna is one of the more familiar gods. I will see a picture of that in a minute. Some of the major Hindu gods, you have Brahma, which is the god of creation, supposedly the chief god. Okay. Now keep in mind when I say God or gods, notice I got the little G there. This is what they say is a part of their beliefs. But overall, the ultimate destination is moksha, which is to get out of this universe and get into that one where they really don't exist, and they get absorbed and they get out of suffering. So they're not going to hell in their opinion, and they're not going to heaven. They're just in a place of bliss where there's really no consciousness. They're just part of the one. That's your ultimate destination. These gods are just means of getting there. And they have these gods to talk about different forces around us in their lives. For example, Vishnu is the god of preservation. So that would be the god you pray to try to keep you from dying from sickness or having problems, preserving life or whatever it is you're looking for. Shiva is destruction and recreation. And Shiva is like our devil. Okay? So that's one that's kind of associated with evil. Then you got Devi, goddess of divine mother, Durga, goddess of perseverance, Lakshmi, goddess of success, and Kali, goddess of destruction and recreation, which Kali and Shiva go together. And that's kind of like the forces of evil. Okay? So we talk about the devil in the Christian faith. They would talk about Shiva and Kali as being behind the things that happen. Okay? I'm going to show some pictures here. Here's some more of them. Sarawati, how do you say that? Saraswati, nude, goddess of music and culture. Krishna, the loving manifestation of Vishnu. Rama is the royal manifestation of Vishnu. Ganesha, elephant head, son of Shiva. And anyway, at this point, I'm going to get out of here and show you some pictures. Let's see what some of these gods and goddesses, how they picture what they look like. Do I?
No. They watch some scary stuff.
Here's some of the names that I just mentioned, what they picture in any of them.
Well,
So they got the elephant. Notice a lot of them have a lot of arms and legs. That's a visible way of saying this God's very powerful. Because the more arms you have, and the more legs you have, you got more forces. This is what they artistically.
How old is this religion?
the oldest religion in the world.
Preceded.
They were smoking dope when they come up with some of that stuff.
Well, it's interesting, I have to say the least.
Hinduism is the oldest religion in the world.
Vishnu, and you notice the extra hands here, over here, Shiva, and some of the ones there. And I think on the same page, Supreme called Brahman. Here's Ganesha, the son of Shiva. Look at that picture of the elephant. The Sapatneli elephant god Ganesha is the lord of success, knowledge, and wealth. Okay? He typically depicted riding a mouse, an elephant riding a mouse, who assists the deity in removing barriers to success, whatever endeavor it is.
Say it's the most important, most important.
No, Brahman is the most important. Here's Shiva. Represents death and dissolution, destroying worlds so they may be recreated by Brahma, which is the chief one. But he also is considered a master of dance and of regeneration, one of the godheads of the Hindu Trinity. Shiva is known by many names, including whatever. And he's got several names. When he is not represented in his blue-skinned human form, Shiva is often depicted as a phallic symbol called the Shiva lingam. And I'm not going to get into the description of what that is, but I think most of us know. And it's connected with procreation. Okay? This is what he looks like most of the time. He's usually got blue skin. You can see. Here's Krishna, also with blue skin. This is one of the most beloved of the Hindu gods. Blue skin Krishna is a deity of love and compassion. He is frequently depicted with a flute, which he uses for his seductive powers. Krishna is the central character in the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita, as well as an avatar of Vishnu, sustainer of the Hindu Trinity. Krishna is widely revered among Hindus, and his followers are known as Vaishnavas. Can you imagine living in a country like that where that's the accepted norm? Keep in mind, every human being has a spiritual nature. They're going to worship someone, something, or multiple things in this case. I'm only going to show about, I'm going to go to 330. This is Rama.
Why do they all have blue skin? Why are they all blue?
That's a good question. The only thing that I know from other religions, blue, for example, African religions, blue is considered a color that keeps evil spirits away. And that's why if you go to the porches in Charleston and the porches of the antebellum houses and stuff like that, they got the sky blue. And if you see the sky blue, the picture is that evil spirits coming through the air, they see the blue and they think they're in the sky and they won't do it. And if you look at a lot of African American houses, a lot of them will paint their houses in blues and aquas and colors like that. When the African slaves were being sold into slavery, they went to the chieftains because the chieftains would have war with other tribes. Instead of killing all of them, he captured them. The Arabs were buying them for slaves, and then the Europeans started getting them for slaves, and then they started shipping them to the Americans for the plantations and the workers. And what they bought them with was blue beads, because the blue beads have more power. So they actually bought those people with blue beads, because in their world, they have that color blue represented power over evil. So blue is kind of a universal color to perspective. Now, whether that's this, but I know in some of the other religions that do come across that. And so it's supposed to keep it away. The perfect embodiment of humankind, mentally, spiritually, and physically, unlike other Hindu gods and goddesses, Rama is widely believed to be an actual historical figure whose exploits form the great Hindu epic Ramayana. Hindu faithful celebrate him during the Diwali festival of light. That's one of their festivals. This one's green. What the heck said? Hanuman. The monkey face. You see the monkey face? It's worshipped as a symbol of physical strength, perseverance, service, and scholarly devotion. This divine primate aided Lord Rama in his battle against evil forces described in epic ancient India known Ramayana. The night of trouble is common among Hindus to chant the name of Hanuman or sing his hymn. Hanuman temples are one of the most common public shrines found in India. Now, from what I understand, there's places in India where there's thousands and thousands of monkeys and nobody touches them. They just roam the streets and they can get in your houses and you're not supposed to harm them. You're supposed to just let them go. And they're kind of like rats in a way because they just take over. Have you ever seen any movies from India? So certain parts of India have large numbers of guns.
This is the one we mentioned before, Vishnu. The peace-loving deity of the Hindu Trinity. Vishnu is the person preserver or sustainer of life. He represents the principles of order, righteousness, and truth. His consort is Lakshmi, goddess of domesticity, prosperity. Hindu faithful who pray to Vishnu, whatever. Believe that in the times of disorder, Vishnu will emerge from his transcendence to restore peace and order on the earth. Now keep in mind, the way they look at the universe, okay, it's good and it's evil, and they're balanced. If things are not going well in your country, for example, you got a tsunami and you kill 200,000 people, or you have a monsoon and a bunch of people drown or whatever, they look at it as the evil at that time is balancing the universe, and then they pray to Vishnu and others to push back. But you're not supposed to interfere in that. When that tsunami hit in 1992, and it was like 200-some thousand people, India was hit, Bangladesh was hit, and there was thousands of people that drowned. Well, the outside world tried to offer help, food and medicine and things like that, and the Indian government refused to let them in because they knew that Christians would come in there and start handing out literature and trying to convert them over. And their answer to the world was, that's fake. It just happened. That's the way it works. And I guess you remember the movies, the Star Wars movies, may the Force be with you. You got the black force and the white force, the same principle of teaching that in the universe there's two forces, good and evil. And one can overwhelm the other for a while, but hopefully good will come back and it will balance the universe out.
So Christianity is not there in India?
It's there, but it's very minute. That you got to remember, they got over 1 billion people. And with over 1 billion people, you're going to have a good number of Christians. More than just 100,000. So you probably got several million that are Christians. But because of the persecution from the government, they don't publicly express that. It's kind of
So that means for the government to use that for control.
Thank you. That's why they want to keep it that way. See, the same thing with Buddhism. That's why the Chinese, like Confucianism, which basically says hands off the government and just live your life in peace by all these principles. Don't worry about what government you're living under. So the Chinese can't control the people in communism because religiously the people can never get together and say, this ain't right. There isn't right and wrong. They accept it as fate. This is their lot in life, so they don't resist it. Whereas we as Christians, we read our Bible, and the Bible says the king is answerable unto God. And then in our government, the people are answerable unto God. So we can hold the king accountable, or our rulers accountable, and that's the reason why you come up with a Republican form of government. Through the process of time, that's what Christianity does. And they threw off the monarchies, because under monarchies, the Catholic Church and the monarchies were controlling people, but after the Reformation, we begin to see revolutions, first American, then the French, that said we're tired of all this control. But when you read the Bible, it says you to be subject to your government, but at the same time, you need to hold that government accountable to the principles. God's law is higher than the government. Whereas under these communist rules, with these religions, they basically say, this is your lot, this is the way it is. Remember in Hindu, you're born into a certain financial level, or like a class, different class, caste. You can't get out of it. You can't marry out of it. You can't do anything in this life. You just have to try to keep your karma going good. Hopefully in the next life you get to the next level. But you can't move out of it. You're prohibited. So if you're stuck in as the untouchables, which is the low lives and the servants, then there's no chance for you to improve your life. And, a lot of these guys that you see, or these people you talk to from India that are doing the service for, you call for help and you end up talking to somebody in India, they're probably what they call middle class. So they're able to make a little more money, but they can't move out of that position. They can't go to a higher point. Now, the ones that come to America and get out of the government's control and out of the Hinduism, they can still practice Hinduism on an emotional level, and they can actually come out of their caste. But if you come over here and look at some of the names, you'll find all of them got almost the same last name. If you ever that. And they usually run a motel, a 7-Eleven.
Patel.
Yeah, Patel. That's a big name. And the doctors.
A lot of doctors are Patel.
Yeah, but they, even then, some of them are more strict, and they're real harsh toward women. You know, it's a man's religion, and women are not treated equally in that religion.
Look at a couple more, and we'll go back to those. This one here is called Lakshmi. Remember, this was the counterpart to the Vishnu. It says here, it comes from the Sanskrit word Laksaya, meaning or aim or goal. She is the goddess of wealth and prosperity, both material and spiritual, depicted as a four-armed woman with golden complexion. It says here, holding a lotus bud, she sits or stands on a massive lotus blossom. The deity of beauty, purity, and domesticity. The image of Lakshmi is often found in the homes of the faithful.
And there again, the multiple arms and legs symbol mobility or power. But she's one of the good ones of the Trinity.
And like Tim said a while ago, Hinduism is documented as the oldest
Organized religion. There's other religions you can find preceding this, but not on the scale of Hindu.
Durga is the mother goddess, and she represents the fiery powers of the gods. It says here she is the protector of the righteous and destroyer of evil, usually portrayed as riding a lion, carrying weapons that are many arms. And you can see how many arms she got there. You know, 8 arms.
All right.
Now, I don't know for sure, but I know
In most of the religions, when you see bells is another deterrent for evil. The ringing of bells, you know, they have the big gongs when you hear, when you hear the Buddhists do that. Churches use the bells. Pagan religions use bells. And the concept behind the bells is the sound of those bells is supposed to keep the evil spirits away. And then the Catholic Church, when they were taking over areas that used the bells for that, took over the bells and put music to it and gave it more of a Christian ring. So now churches have bells in their towers or in their, but at one time it was a pagan symbol. Steeples are the same thing. At one time those were pagan symbols. The church adopted them to confuse the people. So when they got looking for the pagan temples with the steeples, they would come to the church rather than the other. That's a simple explanation. I get it.
Then this one here's got blue skin too. Okay. It says also known as the dark goddess appears as a fierce four-armed woman. Her skin is blue or black. She stands atop her husband Shiva, who lies calmly beneath her feet.
How y'all like that?
Y'all see her right there? Stand right there. Blood soaked, her tongue is hanging out. Kali is the goddess of death and represents the ceaseless march of time toward doomsday.
Nice looking. Have that 70 off the table.
You know, this stuff is foreign to us, but it's interesting when people have got to know it.
Now see, this could be a one-man band here.
The goddess of knowledge, art, and music, she represents the free flow of consciousness.
But she's the daughter of Shiva and Durga, and is the mother of the Vedas, which is the writings that they use to form their religion. Chants to her called whatever often begin and end with lessons on how she endows human beings with the powers of speech and wisdom. She's a little more attractive to look at, even though she's got 4 arms. I guess if she could give you a hug, she could put a big squeeze on you.
What if you slapped him?
Well, that's what I'm saying. If she brings here and left, there's some other facts about Hinduism. The guys in the orange right here, these are people that are kind of like gurus. They're reaching that last stage just before they go out into the forest. Remember I told you about them? So you see them dressed with these codes to signify that they've advanced far enough along in their teachings to become a teacher themselves. People that have the scraggly beards and sit around and look like that, you know. I hadn't looked at this one here. This is the God of creation. I didn't show you that. See the heads, the many faces, the 3. Then you got the arms and stuff. I think this one here. None of y'all have been to India, I assume, so I think it's That's the Brahmin.
Did we give to Christ Randy?
World's third largest religion.
One of the,
Well, there's an explanation. Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
no, what's the third one?
It's the third largest. One thing about a lot of these religions, they are found primarily, they're found primarily in, next slide. That goes back over something we just talked about. Female Hindus are an important element in Hindu spirituality, even though women are not equal to men in practices. In fact, women have to submit to their husbands before their husbands, their fathers. If they don't have a husband and their father dies, then they have to answer to their brother on all kinds of matters. It's really the gurus is one who removes darkness by giving one knowledge of the teachings and wisdom. Now, I don't know if y'all remember, but back when the Beatles were popular, have you heard the term Hare Krishna? You know, and they had a song that they sung with that in there. They got caught up in this stuff. And getting caught up in it, they really introduced into their music some of the basic teachings and beliefs of Hindu and in some cases even Buddhism. And if you remember during the 70s, I remember this very clearly, there was an invasion of these gurus to America. And they were forming communes out in Oregon, in Washington, in places like that. And they were basically had people who followed them supposedly for their teaching. And I had a video, and it's a VCR, and I can't find it, but showed one of these communes, and the people were partially clad, and they would dance and sing and yell and scream for hours on end to get worked up into an emotional frenzy, and then basically give and surrender their whole thinking and their being over to these gurus who would milk them like a cash cow. That one guru out in, I remember he's dead now, but he had something like, I don't know, 60 Rolls Royces. He was filthy rich. Then you had another guy by the name of Reverend Sun Myung Moon in the 70s, the Moonies, and the Moonies did the same thing. They basically come from some of the basic teachings.
Didn't that group work the airports pretty strong?
The Krishnas did. Now, I actually talked to some Krishnas on the mall in Washington, D.C. They were out there hanging out their pencils and their little flowers and stuff. And I came up on two of them, and they had their, their white outfits on and heads shaved. And these two guys were talking to them, and they were really wanting to know about the Krishnas if they could become one. And so I sat there and listened for a little bit. And I finally interrupted, and I told him, I said, look, this stuff is not what you need to be seeking. And the Krishnas shut up. And so I talked about Jesus for just a few minutes. And the two guys were actually, they weren't Christians, and they were looking for, they were college-age kids. And I talked with them on the Washington Mall. Never know what the outcome would be, but those Krishnas, you'll see them at the airports, you see them in places like Washington, D.C., high tourist areas, and they, basically supposed to say they're supporting peace and love and kindness and stuff like that. But you give a donation for their pencils, and of course it goes right back to the guru they're with. They see the guru as a person of holiness, both a saint and living embodiment of the divine. Just to be near one brings blessings. They can be males or females, mostly males, but they can be females. And to be near one, just to touch them or get near one, or set under their teaching is supposed to bring you prosperity and blessings. And a lot of young people, college-age kids, get caught up looking, once again, to fill the spiritual void in their hearts and, looking for answers. And these gurus, with their gobbledygook teachings and stuff, make it sound like they know everything. And really, they don't know anything, in my opinion, but that's what they do. Hindu are devoted to animals. They're kind to animals. They do not kill or eat animals. Several gods take animal-like forms, and we saw some of those pictures. Origins, reincarnation played a role in how these things came into being.
Cows are sacred, provide milk, butter, fuel, and their dried waste or dung helps to be able to cook their food. So they actually use that because it has, fertilizer in it. Plus, it also can be burned with the methane that's in there. They consider her to be more sacred because she gives so much back. So the cow is the most sacred of all of them. Now, I didn't know all that when I was teaching on it. I just thought they thought their ancestors were in the cow, but it's more than that. They see these cows as a special gift from the gods to do all these things for people. Yeah. I like it. I like to eat one of them T-bone steaks myself. Yeah. Other forms of religious devotion, they can take pilgrimages. Now, Christians do this. Some Christians do. Now, I don't know how many of y'all remember back then in history, probably reading about the Crusades. Remember that?
Yeah.
Did any of y'all remember in high school having to read Canterbury's Tales? Y'all remember that? Crazy stuff. But if you read the Canterbury Tales, those were mock stories about Christians taking a journey to a sacred site, like the Holy Land. And the people that were supposed to be going there for holy reasons and how corrupt their lives were. If you ever read the Canterbury Tales, I remember helping my grandson Devin do a paper on it. He said, "Papa, this stuff is kind of filthy stuff, ain't it?" And I said, "Yes, English speaking it is. If it was put into movie form today, it would probably be rated R." But I said that was popular literature, and it was satire against these so-called Christians who, on their way to the Holy Land, were cheating on each other as spouses, getting drunk, and all these other things that people do in sin. But they were on their way to the Holy Land on a pilgrimage. Now, Islam has to take a pilgrimage as part of their 5 things they have to do, and one of them is during their lifetime, they have to go to either Jerusalem, Messina, or Medina. And those are the 3 holy sites of Islam. And they have to go there. And I don't know if you've probably heard Ramadan in the summertime when they march around that black stone, it looks like. They have to go there and do all their sacred things they're supposed to do for that. So they can take pilgrimages as a part of their religious worship, listening and sitting around and listening to gurus. And then, of course, everyday worship of gods and goddesses. They have their home altars, or they can go to the local temple and go through the ceremonies that have been set up. The arts, symbolism is a major part of Hindu art. Multiple arms and legs shows power. Krishna is represented by a flute. Who knows why? Paintings, sculptures, music such as various hymns are a part of their culture and their worship. Use of musical instruments. Classical dance is also incorporated. Maybe you've seen movies or a situation where they have those silk outfits and they're dancing and twirling and to the music and stuff. Now, there are challenges to Hinduism. Invasions have had an impact on Hinduism. It's kind of primarily local religion. It's found in India. But there's some other parts of the world. Now, they got a little temple in Orangeburg, South Carolina. I don't know if you ever drove by there on 301. It's not a temple, it's just a building, but they call it a Hindu temple. And so there's a little community there of enough Indians to have a Hindu temple, and so they probably have some leaders there and stuff. But they're around more than you realize. But anyway, invasions to the country has changed it. They were invaded by different groups through the different times. Of course, the British dominated, created problems, but they later left. And one practice the British taught was when a husband died, his wife was also expected to be burned. And before the British came in, that was a regular practice. If your husband died, you were to be fried. What do you think about that?
It rhymes.
Huh?
It rhymes.
If it- you know what
Husband
I'm gonna do?
dies, you're to be tried.
That's right. If
They'd
that
work
was
harder to
me,
keep you alive.
if my they what?
They'd work harder to keep you
Well,
alive.
that's the whole idea. That's the whole idea. You didn't have to worry about your wife poisoning you or giving you something to make you sick.
That's it.
If he died, she got fried. So that'd be pretty bad. But the British put a stop to that. And so there's been some reforms, but some of these other things, the conflict between Islam and Hindu, though it's not on a large scale, there are Islamic people mostly in the southern part and western part of India, which borders Islamic countries. And there's all the time they got wars breaking out between these two groups. You don't hear about them in the news, but if you were to
look on a world scale and get some news from that area, part of the world, they're constantly fighting, uprisings against each other. They don't like each other at all. Probably the most famous one you've heard of, Mahatma Gandhi, 1869 to 1948. His practice was non-violence. He was a vegetarian. Look at this. The teachings of Jesus, as he studied Jesus, influenced him to become more passive in his resistance. He worked to gain independence from Britain, and his passive actions helped to, and I'll tell you who else was influenced by this guy, was Martin Luther King. He studied Gandhi. And so when he started the civil rights movement, he primarily tried to practice what Gandhi did. The trouble was he had what's that other black leader that was living at the time? Not Jesse Jackson, but Malcolm X, wasn't it? And Malcolm X, of course, was more militant, and they opposed each other. The stories go that Malcolm X was a part of having Martin Luther killed, but I just got through reading a book not too long ago about the FBI and the guy who was in charge of the FBI for years, and he was basically taken out.
J. Edgar Hoover,
Yep.
who was gay.
Yep. Closet gay, but he was a very popular. Now, FBI, I'm beginning to have second thoughts about why they even did. I mean, they're crooks. Some of the contemporary issues they're facing, challenge with Islam, the untouchable rules, there's really a hurt on their economy because there's so many of them that are born into that. It's a drain on the economy. Discrimination against them is harsh. I mean, people can hurt an untouchable and not even be charged with crime. So they're abused in many ways, and because they said that's your lot, so I'm just going to join in your suffering, and that's how they treat them. The caste system itself is archaic. It's beginning to lose some of its influence, but it's still very strong. And like you said, the government can use that to control people. The role of women is a big issue, more than many people would want to understand, but it is a very big issue. In light of the rest of the Western world having more freedom for women and more rights for women, over there it's still like they're living in the Stone Age. And that's why I don't understand when I hear people talk about, well, we need to let Islam, come into an area that has Sharia law. If you study Sharia law, it is very abusive to women, the way they have to act and the way they have to be submissive to their husbands. Their husbands can get away almost with murder. They can be beaten by their husbands, and that's Sharia law. And there are a lot of people that don't understand these religions, that to go and to try to allow those people to exist. In fact, there's some communities that are trying to say because they're Islamic communities, they operate under Sharia law and not American law. And it's a conflict in some of the courts when they bring them in. The lawyers try to defend them on the grounds that, hey, this is religious toleration here. This is under their religion. And under the First Amendment, you can't stop them. And it's becoming an issue in parts of America where there's large Islamic communities. Well, the Indian situation is very similar in how women are treated. Changes are coming, but many are still restrict women in several ways. Globalization has created a tension between religious and cultural practices with practices that are different. This includes the rapid advance of technology in India, which in the past was opposed to it. Now they're rapidly advancing, so now they're exposed to the rest of the world. I read a book probably about 10 years ago. It's called The World is Flat. And it caught my attention, because I know the world's not flat, but it wasn't about the world being flat. It was about the world becoming so small now that you can talk to people around the world and actually study their religions or their beliefs or their governments, or, the world's gotten smaller because of technology. I mean, you turn on the screen, and now we was watching something the other night, and somebody was translating something. They held up their phone. You get the app on your phone, and they can talk into the phone and translate what they're saying. And it's gotten to the point where India is being exposed to the rest of the world. I mean, I can think back as a kid, I never heard about Hindus. I never heard about Buddhists. I mean, I knew they were out there, but I wasn't exposed to any of them. Islam, I didn't know anybody who was Islamic. But once, in the last, I'd say 20 years, I've been exposed to more. Of course, teaching in college, you have them in your class. And there's a big difference between someone who's Islamic or Hindu, or, you know, you said you worked with some people that were Hindus. They're entirely different than the way we think. But keep in mind, they're being exposed to Western culture and our beliefs, and they like the freedom, so it's threatening their way of religion. And somewhere down the road, you're going to have splinter groups come off of Hindu with not as much control. Does that make sense? A mixing of religions. And, but it is opposing it. Areas of influence include Nepal, which is just before you go into China, out of northern India. Indonesia has, you know, a lot of those islands and areas over there, they have some Hindus. The West, believe it or not, they are actually influencing on Western culture in many ways, and the Beatles brought a lot of their thoughts in. The Gurus, music, Beatles, poetry, is actually causing America to have a second thought about our Christian beliefs, to re-examine some of these other religions. Now, that's Buddhism, and we'll just pick that up later. Now, that's an interesting thing there, too, but we won't start that tonight. All right, we got about 5 to 10 minutes. Any questions? Any thoughts?
So, is it safe to say all these people we're talking about that worship all these 230 million gods? are going to
330
hell?
million, get the number right there.
330.
330.
330 million are going to hell, right?
Yes, yes.
They're gonna tell you, you're going to hell.
Well, I know
But they don't
that.
believe it. But see, they won't tell you that because they don't believe in hell.
Right, right.
They'll just say you won't make it off the wheel of life.
Yeah.
You'll stay in suffering. Because see, the goal of these religions that look at time like this, you're endless. You're just endless. The only way to get off this wheel is to be reincarnated back into a form that puts you in the center of that wheel. And I'm talking about W-H-E-E-L. To get you there, because at that point, you have no emotions, you have no feelings, so you can't suffer. And Buddhism does the same thing. They call it nirvana. So your goal is to practice the things that these religions teach, certain morals and values and teachings, these gurus and whatever. And if you're good enough, you'll develop that word karma, which is a way of measuring how good you're doing. So what is that? That's a work of salvation, if you want to look at it like that. But your goal is not to escape hell, because they don't see hell. To them, on earth, living with the suffering that we go with, sickness, pain, hunger, all the things that we experience as human beings, to get out of this would actually be getting out of hell and getting to a situation that's complete bliss. But you're not going to be over there with a consciousness of knowing, hey, I finally made it. You know, I'm here in heaven. Like Christians, we go to be with God in heaven, and we'll actually see our Savior and our loved ones, and we'll experience the joys of living without suffering, without pain, without death, without sorrow. Same thing, but we exist. We have a new body. That's what the Bible says. A supernatural body like Christ has. And we'll live eternally without death ever coming in. They don't see that. They don't see a heaven or a hell. The closest thing that they see as heaven would be getting to that point where you have no emotion, no thoughts. You see, when they sit around and meditate, they're trying to empty their brains of any exposure to any stimulus, like sound, music, anything. The guys that end up in the forest, you reach a point where you're just no clothes, nothing of color. You're just out there, you know, living in the wild, and your whole goal is to empty your mind of any stimulation so that you can reach a point where you're getting ready to be absorbed into the water. And I mean, that's hard for us to comprehend.
I like the streets of gold better, don't you?
No, I mean, the streets of gold. You know, I had a fellow tell me one time, he said, "Preacher, I don't really want to go to heaven because I don't really value walking on streets of gold." And I said, "Well, I've never heard it." He said, "I really like living here with woods and animals and things like that." I said, "Well, I got some good news for you. The Bible says there'll be a new heaven and a new earth." He said, "Really?" I said, "Everything you see here without sin, without sorrow, without heartache and death and all that will be over there. There'll be a new earth, just like what we see here with the animals and stuff." And I said, "So when you become a Christian, not only do you get streets paved with gold, you don't have to walk on them. I'm sure there's some dirt roads you can walk on, but the thing is, you get the best of both worlds." And he said, "Well, I've never heard that before." It's right there in the Bible. Of course, he was an alcoholic, recovering alcoholic, and I had a hard time witnessing to him. Eventually, his family kicked him out of the house. He was living behind some kind of 7-Eleven in a trailer, working part-time because because of his drinking and stuff. But I witnessed to him a couple of times, but that was his argument to me, that he didn't really want to, which that was just a smokescreen. I've never met a Hindu where I sat down and talked with him about his faith or beliefs. All that I've learned is through the teaching and reading and things like that. And I'm not an expert on it by no means. But when I read my Bible and I read what they believe, can you imagine having that many gods to try to have to gain knowledge of, and then being in a deficit mode where you're trying, am I doing good? How am I doing today? Do I get enough karma today? Can I get off this wheel of suffering? And every time something bad happens, you just, instead of asking God to help you or deliver you, you pray with these two gods hoping for deliverance, but you also, at the bottom line, you have to accept that's your fate. You know?
Well, one of the reasons they don't believe, mainly for killing the insects and animals, because they're afraid they might be killing Uncle Harry or something.
That's part of it.
Their
But,
family.
yeah, the people that, the big word that I used a few weeks ago was the word Ahisma, A-H-I-S-M-A. People who believe that look at all living things as a part of the one. So you don't want to destroy something, like you said. It could be somebody on their way back,
Right.
trying to get a better position, and you don't want to interrupt that. And the ones that practice that on an extreme level. Now keep in mind, just like us, we have people who call themselves Christians. But you have some people who are Christians that really, you look at their life, they're devoted, buddy, they don't cuss, they don't do any, it's almost like they're saints with halos over their head, And then you got Christians that are kind of like, well, I do a few little things, but I'm not as strict as they are. You have different levels of Christians. You follow me? Let me show you, let me draw you a line. This is something to think about. When you draw a line like this, let's say over here, these are the very devoted Christians, okay? These people over here are, I just call them nominal, which means they just do enough Christian stuff to get by. Go to church at Christmas, Easter, maybe send an offering in once in a while, maybe say a prayer once in a while. Then you got a group here in the middle, and they do a little more toward this way, but they have prone to slide this way too. So you would call these people liberal, and you call these people conservative. Okay? Now, watch this. The people that are conservative sometimes take it to an extreme. Because what they do is they say, well, you got to dress a certain way. Okay? You got to put your hair on a certain way. You got to, you can't wear makeup. You can't, I don't know why that would be a problem, but it is. And then over here, those things, anything goes. Okay? So, if you look at a scale like this, every religion has this. So you got some Hindus that just kind of go through the motions. They do their little altar thing and stuff like that. But they don't really get into it. They don't take a pilgrimage. They don't go sit under a guru. They might read some of the readings and stuff, but they don't really get deep into it. They're not real devoted. So they're over here more liberal, okay? Islam is the same way. Jews are the same way. Every religion is like that. Every religion. Because human beings are spiritual beings. And how devoted you are, will show out in your life and how you act. So the Bible gives you guidelines on how you're supposed to live in this world. Your conduct, your speech, how you treat your fellow man and stuff like that. But dress codes and stuff like that, like independent Baptists, they are real strict on dress code. If their kids go to the beach, they have to wear jeans when they get older and stuff. And maybe you've known some people at independent Baptists. Whereas Southern Baptists, we're kind of right here in the middle. And even among Southern Baptists, you have liberals and conservatives among Southern Baptists. When I say liberal, they're more, they don't follow the Bible as far as we do. And they don't try to keep every part of the Bible. But every religion has this. So in Hindus, Islam, same thing. Judaism, you have people who follow it to the extreme. For example, Islam, they'll kill you. Because in the Quran it says, if you kill someone who's an enemy to Allah, you can get a blessing and you get to paradise quicker. Or you can be blessed by Allah. And those are the extremists. They're ultra-conservative. Iran is ran by a bunch of religious zealots that follow the letter of the Quran. They'll kill you in a minute. When you go to Iraq, they're more conservative. They're not as extreme. That's the reason why they fight each other from time to time. So among Islam, you got like 5 or 6 different factions. And they're constantly fighting each other. And our government for a long time, how they dealt with the Middle East, was they would arm one against the other because they hate each other. The conservatives hate the liberals, and so what they would do is give Iran weapons and let Iran beat up on them, and then when they beat them down, they turn around and give Iraq weapons and let them fight Iran back. And that's how we dealt with them. That's how the Western world dealt with Islam. Now, it's a whole different world, because this has come into play, and oil and everything else, so it's a little bit trickier. But this is a part of life. Every human being is religious. Every human being is going to worship someone or something. The extremists, it's okay to be an ultra-conservative Christian, by the way. I'm not saying you shouldn't. But, don't get to the point where you reach this and you think you've arrived and you want to drudge everybody else back here because they're not like you. All of us are at different levels in our growth. Even though we're older, we're at different levels of maturity. So the Bible warns us about judging the weaker brother who hasn't gotten to where we are yet. And it was in the Bible. We shouldn't eat meat to idols. Y'all remember reading that? Why was that? Paul says, hey, it's just meat. God created the animal, let's eat. But the weaker Christians said, yeah, but I saw him sacrificing that animal to that God down there, and it bothers me. And when I see you eating that meat, and Paul said, well, if it bothers you, I won't eat it. And then when they wasn't around, he'd eat it. I'm just kind of letting you know. And that's what he was talking about. If you're with someone and you're doing something that offends them because you're here, and you see the difference, he said, make sure that you don't judge your brother because he hasn't gotten there yet. So it's even among Christians. Okay. All right. 7 o'clock. Any other questions before we quit? All right. After, let's see, we'll come back on I think it's January the 8th. Is when we'll meet again for this class. Because next week we got the kids thing, and the following week's Christmas, right? And then you got New Year's, and so the following week we'll be back. We will start with Buddhism, okay? If you got any Buddhists sitting on your coffee tables, bring them so we can look at them.
I had a neighbor, you knew it, he worked at Kimberly Farm.
James Bean.
The first time I ever went visiting with a visiting team, I went to his house. Asked him where he went to church, he said Atlanta.
He was a Buddhist.
Yeah, he's a good guy. And his children went to Curtis.
That's interesting.
His children went to Curtis, and they are smart.
I actually met a person who was a Southern Baptist who switched over to Buddhism when his father was stationed in Japan, and he became a Buddhist. And somebody invited him to our class, and he gave his testimony. And when it was over, I said, why would you do that? Come in here, Southern Baptist, switching horses midstream, dude. And he said, well, just gave him peace. Follow the Eightfold Path. And when we get into Buddhism, very similar to some of the things we believe in Christianity as far as how you should live. Half of the 10 Commandments are in there, which is interesting to me. But Buddhism was before Christianity. These are ancient religions. Okay?
Bunch of them in Vietnam, but
Must have.
ooh,
But we'll talk about why they
bunch of
changed
Buddhists,
that.
bunch of Buddhists. Where you went, there was
Let's have prayer and then we'll dismiss.
Damn,
Lord, we just pause tonight, and as we study these religions, we just want to say thank you again. That by your grace, you allow us to be born in a country where the truth has been taught, and from childhood we have heard the truth. Now, Lord, give us a burden in our heart for people who don't know the truth. Our country is basically being invaded by people from all over the world. Immigrants coming in here with their beliefs and stuff. Lord, help us not to draw back, but to know what we believe and why we believe it. Give a defense for the gospel of Jesus Christ. Lord, we pray for these people around the world tonight that they would have someone talk to them about you, who you are, and their need of a Savior. And Father, as we enter into Christmas, and as we, take up offerings for Lottie Moon, they would be reminded that whatever we give can help missionaries to go and share the good news. Now, Lord, once again, be with those in our church family who are not doing well and could not be with us today, to strengthen them. Bring them back to us until we meet again. We give you thanks in Jesus' name. Amen.